All right, friends, it is story time, and we're going to talk about a story that we talked about in service a couple weeks ago, but we're just going to do a recap and focus on what we talked about. And so this story begins like this. Jesus is with the disciples, and he tells them, hey, you guys go ahead to the next place that we're going. You guys go ahead of me. I'll meet you there. I'm going to stay back. And the reason that Jesus stayed back is because he was spending alone time with God. This is something so important. In fact, there's nothing more important that we could do with our time than spend it with God, spend alone time with God. And you see what Jesus was doing is before he was moving on to the next thing, he wanted to take that important step of seeking after God before he moved on to the next thing. And so here's what happens. The disciples, they're out in the ocean, okay? The next place they were going, they had to hop in a boat. They had to hop in a boat, and they had to get over there. But you know what happened? I feel like anytime a story is in the Bible and it has a boat, something bad happens. And in this case, it was a storm. Oh my goodness, there was a huge storm brewing. There were storm clouds up in the sky. There was rain falling down. There was thunder. There was lightning. There was big waves crashing against the boat. They were in the boat probably doing the boat dance, even though they didn't want to be doing the boat dance. Like it was a scary situation, okay? Like the disciples were terrified, and they had every right to be terrified. I know if I was in their shoes, I would have been scared too. And so the story continues. Jesus is coming out to meet them. But Jesus is incredible because what he does is he literally walks on the water. Like, doesn't walk on dry ground. He walks on top of the water. Like, he steps on it and it doesn't, like, sink. Like, he's on top of it. And he walks over to meet the disciples in the boat to catch up with them. And they're in there like, ah! You know, freaking out. Like, what's going on in here? And Jesus is over there. And he, whenever they see him, they freak out even more because they're like, it's a ghost! Like, they think Jesus is a ghost. Like, yeah, they're so terrified that they just like, they've lost it, okay? And Jesus responds to them freaking out thinking he's a ghost. And he says, you know, don't be afraid. Take courage. It's me. It's Jesus. You don't have to be afraid. And I love what Peter does here because he steps up, okay? In this moment, he has great faith. He knows that his life is in God's hands. He's not even focused on the storm anymore. He's focused on Jesus. And because his focus is on Jesus, he gets ready to do something incredible. He says, Jesus, if it's really you, you can tell me to step out onto the water and I will. And so Jesus responds to him and says, all right, Peter, it's me. Come on out here. And so Peter does it. He takes a step. And before you know it, guess what's happening? Peter is walking on the water. He's walking on the water. Just like Jesus was walking on the water, he's walking on the water. And he's drawing closer to Jesus. You know, the word says that as we draw close to God, he draws close to us. And so I imagine in this moment that as Peter is walking towards Jesus, I imagine Jesus is probably walking closer to him too. But then all of a sudden, something happens. Something happens that takes Peter's focus off of Jesus back to the storm. Maybe something scary happened again. I'm not sure. But his focus shifted from Jesus to the storm, and the second that his focus got off of Jesus, he sunk. He sunk into the water. But whenever he sunk, he cried out to Jesus to save him, and Jesus pulled him out and saved him, and he calmed the storm. And so the point I want to make from this story, boys and girls, is that what we choose to focus on is super important. Because again, what we see here is when Peter is focused on Jesus, he does something incredible. You know, he's drawing closer to him. He's moving closer to him. But the moment that he focuses on his problem, the storm, it's almost like when his focus shifted to the storm, he sunk deeper within it because he sunk in the water, right? And I'll never forget this time in my life personally. I was dealing with a situation and a thought came across my mind that I believe was God speaking to me. And he said, if you keep focusing on the problem, you're never going to find the solution. Because here's the reality, boys and girls. The solution is in Jesus. The solution is in his hands. Our life is in his hands. And so why focus on the storm when we can focus on the solution, Jesus? Because ultimately what we're focused on is what we're heading towards. You know, whenever I look forward, whenever I look to the right and I'm walking, I'm heading towards the direction I'm looking in. And so what we focus on is ultimately where we're heading. And so we can either be focused on Jesus, heading closer to him, or we can continue to focus on the storm, the problem, and sink within it. Get closer to it. But I don't know about you guys. I want to get closer to Jesus. I want to get closer to the solution. And so what I would challenge you with, boys and girls, is just like our memory verse says, whenever worry creeps in, whenever you're surrounded by a storm, a scary situation, something that you're not sure what to do, maybe it's just a tough situation, you're discouraged, you're sad, whatever the situation may be that you're facing, that it feels like you're surrounded with, focus on Jesus. Don't let that worry, don't let that discouragement, don't let that fear overwhelm you. Focus on Jesus. Don't worry about it. Pray about it, because ultimately your worry, it doesn't make it any better. In fact, worry is the result of a lack of trust in God. You just got to trust and believe that your life is in his hands, because here's the reality, boys and girls, is that in his hands, God's got the whole world in his hands. He is in control. We have nothing to worry about. In a moment, it may be scary. But again, when Jesus got in that boat, in an instant, in a moment, the storm was calm. The same way, Jesus can do that in our life. He can calm our storms instantly. It may not happen instantly all the time, but he can do it. We just have to trust in him and his timing. And through the middle of the storm, focus on him and pray, seek after him, because we know that in him, we're going to find the solution. And so anyways, boys and girls, I hope that encouraged you. Let's go ahead and get back to the stream.